Right, hello and welcome back to the Cine Skinny. It's the podcast from the team behind the Skinny. It's a full house today. It's me, Peter, with Jamie,
Hello,
Lewis,
Hello.
and Anahi.
Hi.
And it's a very special Cine Skinny this week because we are here with atmospheric lighting at Upload Studios in Leith, talking all about this year's Glasgow Film Festival, which starts the day this comes out, if I manage to edit this quickly enough, and runs from the 1st until the 12th of March at a variety of venues across central Glasgow, mostly, Jamie. Is that right? It's like GFT and Cineworld and places of this nature.
That's accurate.
Of this nature.
you know, cinemas, places of this nature. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about a bunch of films playing at GFF, some reviews, some recommendations, some food tips, best pubs, etc., etc. But before we start, Jamie Dunn, please do a short introduction to the vibes of this year's Glasgow Film Festival as a bit of place setting. How are the vibes?
The vibes are really good, I think. GFF came back in person last year after a couple of years online. And yeah, it's just great to see it back properly with like live events back on the docket. There's a lot more guests this year, I think, as well. So it seems like it's almost back to full strength as it was a few years ago. So that's really encouraging. You know, it's exciting to see live events like Under the Skin with the BBC Symphony Orchestra performing Michael Levy's score. That's actually, now I think about it, in the West End. That's at Queen Margaret University. So, sorry, not Queen Margaret Union. So there's some West End venues. Yeah, no, it's doing everything that GFF does well. You know, it's got its commitment to women filmmakers, which I think is amazing, and a lot of other festivals could probably learn from, you know. So Adura Anna Shields Girls going to open the festival. It's great to have like that a kind of local film opening it, but then it's going to finish with Nida Mansour's Polite Society, which is really exciting. It's just come from Sundance with like a real kind of buzz about it. So yeah, I can't think of that many festivals that open and close with galas from women of colour and about kind of, you know, young women's stories. So that's really exciting. They also kind of do that with a retrospective as well. You've got Lee Grant retrospective, you've got the Gloria Graham retrospective, which is playing in the mornings and afternoons. You've got an audience award, which is 50-50 men and women. So yeah, they kind of really, you know, put their money where their mouth is in terms of like, you know, showcasing female talent. They're also really great at, you know, putting Scottish filmmakers at the front as well. So Adura's film's opening, but you've also got people like James Price, his debut features going to be playing. You've got like 2 Mark Cousins films. You've got things like the documentary Cassius X, which is like Stuart Cosgrove's. Well, it's not his film; it's based on his account of Muhammad Ali. So yeah, they really kind of care about Scottish film, and I think they've shown themselves to be like probably like a really like probably the best launchpad for a lot of kind of up and coming Scottish talent. So yeah, all vibes are good.
Vibes confirmed good, Jamie Dunn. Speaking of Lee Grant, by the way, I don't think we've plugged it yet. There's a really, really good interview that Jamie did with Lee Grant.
It's so good. Holy shit.
I mean, she's just like great. So like it'd be so easy to edit to good interview.
No, it was sick, Jamie. You never found out who she thinks you look like?
Yeah, it was really annoying because at the end of the Zoom call, it cut out because like I'd run out of time, and she was just about to tell me that I reminded her of one of her an actor who she used to work with. So we'll never know who that is. I want to assume it's one of the like really handsome ones. You know?
Yeah.
You could just hit her up, slide in her DMs.
Yeah, I don't know if she's got Instagram. Maybe she does actually. I don't know.
Hunt her down.
Well, if we find out, we will let you know on a later episode. But yeah, that interview with Lee Grant was in the February issue of the magazine, but it's on the website just now. So go and read it. It's very good. So we've got 4 films from the GFF programme to talk about, and we'll probably just start talking about them now. With How to Blow Up a Pipeline, the new film from Daniel Goldhaber, who directed Cam, which is a kind of like innovative film about online sex workers. This new film, you'll never guess what it's about from the title. So it's about a group of idealistic young people who come together from across America to sabotage an oil pipeline in Texas. Directed by Daniel Goldhaber, but inspired by Andreas Malm's 2021 book, which is like a non-fiction kind of manifesto on the moral and political aspects of sabotage and other forms of direct action as a response to the climate crisis. This film is like a fictional piece based on the ideas in the book, and it fucking rocks. Here we go. Pyro, air horns, the whole lot. This film is great. Now, the thing about this one is, as an online lefty, you know, I listen to podcasts.
You
Does
do.
that mean
I
in real life
enjoy-
you're not a lefty?
No, what I mean,
An online lefty, a real life righty. Is that-
You're catfishing the left.
yeah, with tremendous success. No, what I mean is I listen to podcasts. I enjoy memes. I don't actually do anything, but I am online. This is the kind of film that I would always like. A film with this title and premise, I would always be like, yes, this is great. So we'll come back to like the politics of it in a bit. It's actually just a really, really good, let's get the gang together and do X thriller. It's really tense, it's really snappily edited, it's really well paced. The performances are great. Ariella Bera, who co-wrote it and I think produced as well, who plays Sochi, who's like the kind of ostensibly the lead. She's brilliant. Jake Wary, great name, really suits the character as Dwayne, who's this guy who lives in like rural Texas in the path of all this development in the oil industry, and whose house gets bought out in a kind of eminent domain thing so they can build an oil pipeline through his back garden. He's excellent as just a kind of like slightly downcast but also like incredibly interior guy who tells this kind of ragtag group about like how to basically track an oil pipeline like you're trying to chase a wolf across like a mountain. It's great fun. Really big like synthy drones on the score, and its politics by thriller standards is a 10 out of 10. It has the courage of its convictions, no spoilers, but it's called How to Blow Up a Pipeline, what do you expect to happen? But one of the things that's really interesting about it is its positioning, because it sort of places this sabotage plot as being against the system rather than against like an individual baddie. Like, it's not PvP. Like, it's not John Oil Industry being like watching the moves of the children, being like, oh, moving chess pieces on a board to be like, I'm going to stop them blowing up the pipeline. It's the lads against the system, and it rocks. Anahit, you also watched this.
Yeah, I watched
and I
it
believe
last
you
night.
also think that this film slaps pretty hard.
It does slap pretty hard. Yeah, it's fucking great. Very kind of, I think it's really interesting that it's taking a quite, not necessarily conservative, but definitely very traditional, like Hollywood medium, which is like the thriller. Like it has almost that sort of John Grisham-y vibe to it, but like good, you know? But it's like taking that idea and then doing like a very interesting kind of radical politics with it. I think it's really interesting how it thinks through ideas of terrorism. Like it uses very explicit language around terrorism and the kind of ethical implications of what that means, and like who is really doing the terrorizing in a world of climate crisis, who is really creating danger. And it has like also just a very interesting kind of structure in that, yeah, like you say, it's this like ragtag team and you're kind of following them as they learn how to blow up a pipeline. But at these really like crucial, like cliffhangery moments, it will suddenly like stop and then it will go back and kind of like almost the origin story of each one. And it reminded me a little bit, and this is like an odd comparison, I think, but a little bit of Murder on the Orient Express, which, spoilers for Murder on the Orient Express, like the book, in that you kind of realize that each of these people has like a very, very personal reason for wanting this thing done. And it's very clever at kind of showing through these individual stories all of like the myriad ways in which the climate crisis can affect people, which I thought was like very clever in that it's, like you say, about a system, but about the humans that are affected by the system. Like it's very good at kind of balancing those two things. And then the cast is just sick. Like the cast is so good. Like a lot of really, really interesting up and comers. So Sasha Lane, who is no longer really an up and comer, who is just amazing from the likes of American Honey. And I went on her Wikipedia to just remember what else she'd been in. And like the first bit is like from American Honey and like Loki. And I was like, she was in Loki for a second. But anyway, she's also from Loki. And
Conversation
then
with Friends as well.
she was what?
Is she not in Conversation with Friends? Am I getting mixed up?
Yes,
Yeah.
she's in Conversations with Friends. Yeah, she's just like a very, very interesting actress. I like her a lot. And then, oh yeah, she was also in The Miseducation of Cameron Post, which then one of the other guys in this, whose name I've forgotten because that's how I am. Forrest Good Luck. Yeah, who's this like Native American Indigenous actor, and he was also in The Miseducation of Cameron Post, and he's also in this. And so then you have like this really interesting kind of like Indigenous grounding behind like kind of climate. It's just like so good. James Lawson, who was in The Batman as the mayor and was also in like Farewell and More. Just like a really, really good cast. Just feels very like all of these people are going to go big places, and this has like captured them in a very like crystallized them in a very particular moment in time. Yeah, I just thought it was sick. I had such a great time.
It is really, really good. And I want to talk about strange things to be reminded of when watching this film. It reminded me a bit of The Running Man, 1980s Arnold Schwarzenegger banger. Partly because of the synthy score and partly because the font is really similar right at the start. So that was what initially got me onto The Running Man. But I think the thing that's interesting is they're both films that place you from the off, like full square behind people who have been painted as bad by a corrupt society and are here to like mess with the set dressing, basically. It's just that this time they're a bunch of normal student-y lads rather than Arnold Schwarzenegger in a sick Adidas jumpsuit. Jamie, what did you think of this film? Did it make you want to do things that for legal reasons you would have to disavow saying that you want to do?
Oh man, yeah, I'm ready to blow up everything now. I'm in there. Like I think I could actually do it now as well. The film is so detailed about how to do this. I reckon I could put together a little nifty bomb right now and let's go, guys. I'm ready. Yeah, the filmmaking is just properly great. It's shot in 16mm. It looks really grainy and cool. Really kinetic. The score, like you say, Peter, is amazing. What I like is it doesn't paint these kids as angels either. They're kind of reckless and foolhardy. And they get drunk on the night before the big mission, and like they're all hungover, and it's like, what are you doing, guys? Two of them start to have sex when they're like in the middle of the mission as well.
That was iconic behavior.
Yeah, it's like I love it. Like they're like but the film is just so good at like making you empathize with them, and I love the flashbacks and showing you how each of them have a story and why they're here. But yeah, it's just great filmmaking. Like it reminded me of. Actually, the Safdies a little bit, like in terms of the kind of like pulsating score and kind of the propulsion of it. But then you're right, it has these amazing cliffhangers where it's like, oh my god, what's going to happen? The kid's just been blown up. Is he going to die? And then it takes you back and tells you like a character story. Yeah, really, really great. And you're right, the politics are like forceful. It's like direct. It's saying this is important. It's like it's quite rare to see this kind of film actually. Like even good films along this lines, like Kelly Reichardt's film Night Moves. It dealt with similar ideas, but it went into kind of melodramatic areas, and this doesn't. It's just really direct. It's almost like a documentary or something. It's like really forceful. It's got its eye on the ball. Great work.
One thing I have seen, what I would call, what's the best way to put this? Killjoys on Letterboxd saying is that it doesn't necessarily paint the most accurate reflection of the organizational work required to put something like this together. And what I would say to that is, don't be such a nerd. This is like a kind of slightly pulpy thriller that has good and interesting politics and good and interesting storytelling in it. And I think it's really important, especially in the days of one of the main contenders for the first ministership of the country going on the telly and saying that they're against net zero and wanting to protect North Sea oil jobs. It's good to have a film that challenges that viewpoint, but that is also funny and good.
Yeah.
Like, not everything has to be vegetables.
Yeah.
You're allowed to have a piece of cake from every now and then.
And I thought it also did say something quite interesting about how like these organizing systems work. Not so much in, like you say, the kind of boring like admin-y aspects of it, but there is that bit with like Sochi's kind of origin where she's in this group and they're just talking about like divestment and blah blah blah. And I think how like a reflection of how a lot of climate activism does work, which is like, XR being stupid and ineffectual, and she's like, no, we need to like do something. And I think it is quite representative of that element of climate activism, which is maybe it is just too much people sitting around talking about things and not enough people doing things. And I say this as someone who does not do things, so it's not even like judgmental, but I just think it is like it's good at kind of pointing that out and thinking about that dynamic.
And nobody ever says about the Ocean's 11 lot that they could have found some other way to make all their money.
Yeah, or that heisting is actually just a lot of like checking your emails, which I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
There must be a lot of emails.
I'm sure that before they did that big gunfight in Heat, they had so many meetings about it, but I'm not interested in hearing about it, frankly. So How to Blow Up a Pipeline rocks. It's great. You should go and see it. And thankfully, there are many opportunities to do so. So it's on Thursday the 2nd March at 6 p.m. and Friday the 3rd of March at 3:15 p.m. at the GFT as part of the Glasgow Film Festival. But as part of GFT's like kind of we are not just in Glasgow, thing, it's also on at the Cameo in Edinburgh, DCA in Dundee, and Eden Court in Inverness on Friday the 3rd at 8:30 p.m. And it's also on at the MacRobert in Stirling on Monday the 6th, which I think is also at 8:30, possibly at 8 o'clock. There are no screenings in the Northeast. I wonder why that is. But there you go.
What's in the Northeast?
Oil.
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 I see. Yes, okay.
You want some little Elgin lad getting any ideas?
Pipeline, eh? So next up is a film that Lewis has picked out of the programme for a podcast all about how much we like movies. It's very fitting. It's called I Like Movies. It's set in a small town in Canada in 2003. Socially inept cinephile Lawrence dreams of studying film at NYU, and he gets a job at a local video shop in order to raise the money he needs for tuition. His single-mindedness causes a lot of chaos in the film's kind of title comes from the dialogue point where someone, Lewis, says that they should go to a party, and the response is, no, I like movies. There is also a Leonardo DiCaprio point-at-screen name of film comes on screen thing in How to Blow Up a Pipeline, but I don't want to ruin it because it is actually hilarious. But I like movies. Lewis, what did you think?
Well, when we first sort of brought this up, I think we were in the office and you'd compared it to Funny Pages, which is a film that we covered on the podcast around the middle of last year. And there are similarities between these two films. Both depict quite dysfunctional families in small towns in the middle of nowhere North America during the early 2000s. So it's part of a general increasing interest in the early 2000s as a historical period that has... that resonates with the present day but has distinct differences. And both protagonists are quite irate kids with an all-consuming passion for a particular niche. So in Funny Pages, it was comics, and in I Like Movies, it was movies. So I liked Funny Pages, and it was a strange sort of black comedy where this kid's quest for artistic greatness just created so much chaos, and he made everything worse and worse and worse until the very point of the film was lost. But I think what makes I Like Movies a step up is that sort of underlying tragedy of an all-consuming passion is depicted with a much more crushing sympathy. Lawrence, who's the main character, struggles in his media class. Despite knowing everything there is to know about films, he can't bring himself to complete assignments that don't excite him. He instead submits these really weird, crummy, but very energetic SNL-style skits with his best friend Matt. He gets this job at the video rental store but refuses to try and sell customers the latest Shrek DVD because he wants to discuss the works of Stanley Kubrick. And he's got no social skills. He's very disrespectful to his single mother. He calls Matt a placeholder friend until he gets into NYU film school. And that sort of brings it into the choice in setting. The time period that it's set in, 2003, has a lot of the same problems that bother North America today, like suburbs and small towns that are really cut off, unwalkable, and quite sort of isolating and dehumanizing. It can be really hard to make it in these environments when you're neurodivergent or struggle with mental illness. But 2003 was a long time before people started having casual conversations about neurodivergence and mental illness, before the nomenclature that we use to navigate these issues entered the everyday lexicon. So the film is just this 100-minute exploration into these sort of states of being without completely incapable of using our modern labels. And it is a very good, moving and realistic depiction. So, back to Funny Pages, the protagonist of that was quite a sheltered kid who was very disconnected from reality. Whereas Lawrence faces things that I think audiences will find achingly familiar. There's a scene where he's 40 minutes late for his shift at the video store, and he has to get changed in the staff room into this garish retail uniform whilst having a panic attack. And it's the kind of social realism that was absent in Funny Pages. And the truth is that Lawrence is difficult to be around, right? He's disrespectful to everyone. He sort of destroys his relationships with everyone. And in spite of that, the film is still interwoven with these scenes where you're really quite sympathetic towards them. It shows that no matter how unempathetic people can be, they're still deserving of sympathy. It's this post-coming-of-age film, so I think that it's far more similar to Lady Bird or The Half of It, the film that was on Netflix a few years ago, because it's sort of about characters who learn their lessons too late, who, their teenage years become disasters, and despite that, life just goes on and you meet new people, and it gives quite concrete lessons in how to get past it. So it's really interesting, really moving, sad in the sense that, everything is tragic, but quite uplifting in that doesn't mean that life itself is tragic. Very good film.
Yeah, this one took me a bit by surprise because I think when it starts, you do think that you're watching like Superbad or like some other kind of less sophisticated American teen movie because the kid is obnoxious. The kid is a little shit, and he is horrible to everyone. But I think it's like, it's a film about, why somebody becomes a little weirdo. It's because like he is isolated because he's went through something really horrible. And I can't think of a US indie film that would actually deal with such a spiky subject, and I don't want to like give away what his problem is, but like, yeah, it's about grief, it's about depression, it's about just the kind of spikier things of being a teenager that actually teen films don't often get into. So I really appreciate that, and you can probably tell that like it's from Canada. It's a bit interesting, those kind of weirder, harder to less fun topics, so it manages to be actually really funny. I think it is a funny film. Like this kid, when he gets this job at the video store, he does things like he'll recommend Todd Solondz Happiness to this couple who's looking for like a romantic comedy for the weekend, or like there's a running gag about how his best friend, who Lawrence says is like a chronic masturbator, has like stolen Wild Things, and he's refusing to pay back the fine, so it's like funny running gags about this kind of era, but it's also kind of a really loving look back at like video stores and how they were actually safe havens for sort of people who didn't fit into society. So I feel like he is escaping into movies because he isn't fitting in, and I think it'll be like a really toe-curling film for a lot of people because it does go into a kind of bit of the toxicity around cinephilia. This kid just relates to everyone through movies, and it's like he judges people on their worth, what they like. So if you don't like Stanley Kubrick, or you don't know the films of Paul Thomas Anderson, he sort of seems to think you're less, which I think a lot of people, I certainly, when I was a kid, I was a bit like this. Yeah, I recognise a lot of me in this little weirdo, So I think Andy, who's going to GFF, will probably see and likes movies and doesn't like movies, loves movies, is obsessed with movies, might see a bit of himself in Lawrence and realise that actually it's not a healthy way to be. So yeah, the film was really refreshing in that way. I thought it was really good. Maybe Napoleon Dynamite would be a good sort of touchstone for me. It's this obnoxious kid who you kind of hate at first, but actually you begin to love. He's just quite endearing, and like that film, it's sort of a bit deeper than it seems initially. So yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun, really winning. It looks great. It's shot in kind of 4:3 aspect ratio. The framing really pops. It's full of kind of cine literate jokes, like I said. So yeah, kind of winning movie.
I think like the whole thing about like the kid being incredibly obnoxious, but the film is not an obnoxious film to watch. Like I think most people will enjoy it. I think part of that is that you're right, it explores the toxicity behind cinephilia and that he is this quite like irate film bro, but nobody takes it lying down. Like every character, even those who don't show up for very long, like have a great moment where they get to sort of stand up for themselves and sort of make a statement on who they are. So even this sort of like B plot about his best friend that he's splitting up with because his best friend wants to bring the girl he has a crush on as an editor into the project they're making. The second Lawrence is very like dismissive and slightly sexist, she just lists all these like great famous female editors who have worked on, these famous masterpiece films. So, it's quite heartwarming in that regard, and that like there's no character who's kind of left out in the cold really. Everyone has a backstory that, some vary in terms of just how like tragic they are, but they all get a real chance to share them. So yeah, really, I think that it's got the nominated for the Audience Award. Is that right?
Yes, this is.
Yeah. So I think that like it'll show like quite popularly with audiences, especially now that like annoying film bros are kind of like the butt of a joke on the internet.
That's really annoying. Like but that whole discourse is like really frustrating. Just to say.
I do not know which.
There was like an article in The Guardian or something that was like, oh, all of these like film bros, blah, blah, blah. And it was like citing film bro-y films as being like this kind of radical Filipino director who makes like three. And it was basically like the whole article was like, if a film is 3 hours, that's a film bro film. Like, oh, who has the time? It's just like pretentious men on the internet telling you. And it's like, that's not that's radical. Shut the fuck up.
People immediately started misinterpreting like sort of annoying kids who preach about how Stanley Kubrick is the greatest director of all time to like anyone who has like a sort of, eclectic passion for different types of cinema
Yeah.
is a film bro. And that what that usually means is
stupid.
like foreign language films
Yeah,
or something
yeah,
like that, films
yeah,
from
yeah.
other countries that are.
Like, God forbid.
But this, I think, is pertinent to that discussion in that, like, this kid is annoying, he is unpleasant, and is quite toxic. So we like to hate him.
You also can't write an article in a newspaper complaining that other people are pretentious. Sorry, you just can't do it. I'm not going to allow it.
Just on a base level.
Coming from this team of people who write a newspaper.
Yeah, from the four of us on our podcast, wags finger in your direction.
Oh, but we are very annoying.
Well, exactly.
We know that,
We're very
don't we?
pretentious.
Yeah.
But we at least are self-aware enough to admit it.
Yes.
I also like to see the fact that no young character who behaves in an unpleasant way will ever be let off by the Cine Skinny podcast. We will find you. We will drag you.
Just antagonism towards children.
Children, watch out. So, I Like Movies is on Wednesday the 8th of March, at 6:15, and Thursday the 9th at 3:15, both at Cineworld on Renfrew Street in Glasgow. Like Leah said, it's also up for the Audience Award, which is voted for by the audience of GFF. So yeah, it's on the 8th and the 9th. Go and catch it. I Like Movies. Lovely stuff. Right, third for today is Ramona, film set in Madrid in what is, roughly speaking, the modern day, although most of the film is in black and white, so it is slightly hard to tell. You have to use context clues and things of this nature to work it out. We follow Ona, who is a young woman in her 30s who's been living in London for the past few years with her chef husband Nico, but now she's returned to Madrid with dreams of becoming an actor. Things get a bit confusing for her relationship and career when she spends an afternoon day drinking and flirting with a guy called Bruno in this like kind of Madrid bar. And she goes for an audition the next day, and it turns out, who'd have thunk it, Bruno, director of the film, love triangle gong sounds, and we're off. Jamie, you picked this one out. Why did you pick it, and what did you think of it?
Well, first of all, it's described in the programme as a mix of French New Wave and the films of Greta Gerwig, so that instantly drew me in. It's also playing in the Viva el Cine Español strand, which is like the Spanish strand, which is like celebrating contemporary Spanish cinema, so I thought it'd be nice to dip my toe in there. And yeah, I thought this was an absolute delight. It was like a real kind of espresso hit of a movie, really vibrant, witty. I thought it's sent on a really amazing performance from Lourdes Fernandez, who plays Ona. She's this kind of mercurial young woman who's, trying to choose between two men, and she's just like endlessly charismatic. I could really watch her do anything. She just, really cool, really funny. It's just a really kind of unpredictable performance. Never quite knew where she was going to go next. Really vibrant. I would say maybe she's better than the character, because the character's a bit of a cliche. I think we've seen quite a few films recently about women in their late 20s or early 30s who are having a bit of a crisis. So Frances Ha is an obvious example, but there's also kind of Peter Mackie Burns' Daphne from a few years ago. There's so many French films like along this vein, like Jeune Femme, Agnes in Love from the last couple of years ago, and then last year a film that we all kind of liked in the podcast was the Norwegian film, The Worst Person in the World, which shares a lot of similarities, especially in the structure. It uses a kind of like novelistic structure in chapters as well. But yeah, I think Andrea Bagni, the director, has found kind of new wrinkles for this story as well. I think part of the freshness comes from the setting. I think Madrid is an amazing city with a kind of wonderful, kind of vibrant atmosphere. But it's also a kind of edgy city. It's a city where there's a lot of crime and violence as well. So so the flats where Ona and Nico live, her husband, it's this kind of cool and trendy area of Madrid, but they also have squatters who are on the floors below. There's drug addicts in the stairwell. There's a rapist on the prowl. So Ona feels nervous about this place, but Nico likes it because it's cheap and cool. So it's I think it's kind of honest about cities. Sometimes romantic comedies make everything look a bit sort of sunny and beautiful, and I think this has that sunny, beautiful vibe, but it's also has some edgy parts. So it kind of reminded a bit of Almodovar films in it that way. Especially there's a joke as well, it's like we're living in an early Almodovar film because we've got these junkies and prostitutes kicking around. So that's kind of the vibe, which is a bit quite fresh, I think. I also love the opening scene, it's like just fantastic. It's like you say, Peter, it's Ona meets Bruno in this kind of like little dinky Madrid cafe, and they just start talking and drinking and having tapas, and just like it's just a really smart, funny script, and it's just really nice to watch like really charismatic, beautiful people like chat and hit it off on screen. You know, that's the kind of vibe. But what happens at the end of that scene is Bruno says he loves her, which is a kind of thing that happens in movies. You know, people fall in love instantly, and we've kind of like accepted that as a kind of movie cliche. But I think this film is kind of deconstructing that a little bit. It's trying to kind of work with those ideas and explores it, you know, over 90 minutes. That opening scene is great. There's also an amazing audition scene where Ona performs 2 monologues, one dramatic and one comic. And she starts by saying, okay, I'm going to do my first comic monologue my first dramatic monologue, and it's from Annie Hall. And Bruno's like, hold on a minute, Annie Hall's a comedy. And then Ona goes on to explain, actually, no, it's not at all. Woody Allen's character's like a controlling psychopath. You know, and she gives this kind of like really dark interpretation, and then she goes on to do Before Sunset, but make that a really kind of like dark comedy about this woman who kind of gave up her life while this man went, you know, this man she met while interrailing has just went on with his life and wrote a book and got married. So it's a film that clearly knows what's went before and the films that it's influenced by, but it's kind of knows the cliches as well, so it kind of avoids them. So yeah, it's a kind of cine-literate film. It's really kind of vibrant, fun. Yeah, I had a really good time watching this.
I also watched this, and I think I probably had a pretty good time as well. I don't think I enjoyed it quite as much as you. I think it is quite a slight film, and it really does wear its influences on its sleeve. I think if you saw Worst Person in the World and liked that, you will like this, because they are actually quite similar in terms of like their structure. They both use, like you say, the kind of like chaptered structure, but they are similar in terms of like the way that they think about sort of like love triangles and different aspects of people's lives becoming like tangled up in each other. I think it is quite a short film as well. It's more like kind of 75, 80 minutes than an hour and a half. So it feels like it has this initial explosion of the kind of meet cute in the bar between these two people. And then it's sort of like, it's expanding from there, but there isn't necessarily a whole load of places for it to go. But at the same time, it's quite like, it has a kind of breezy tone for a lot of it, but is able to pull in these quite emotional moments. There's some stuff around Ona's like family past that's actually really well dealt with, because it just sort of creeps in the way that these kind of things do at points when you, as the person saying it, aren't necessarily expecting it. I think the cinematography is great. I will always respect a film that shows how small the average city centre flat is. There's a scene where Ona and what's his name? Nico, thank you, are making dinner in this galley kitchen on either side, on these like benches at either side. And then Nico just goes to the toilet, which is just off the kitchen, but he's just continuing the conversation from the toilet while they're still making dinner. And this is the kind of realism that I am here to see. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's short, it's sweet, it looks great, it's nice and charismatic. I think you'll probably at the very least like it. And you can't say further than that for a new film that you had
nice.
never heard of until about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. That's what you want.
Yeah, I think you're right that maybe it isn't quite as like groundbreaking a film in terms of its visuals. It's not as virtuosic as something like Worst Person in the World. But I actually think the character's maybe more interesting. I think the biggest flaw for me about Worst Person in the World was the character just things happened to her. You know, she was quite passive. But I think I like Ona because she's like a kind of force of nature, you know, and she has female friends. She goes off and like rants at these men who are like driving her crazy. You know, she's a bit more fiery. You know, a bit more kind of like to her, I think, and a kind of bit more a spiky character. So yeah, I appreciated how it's got like it gives her a bit more dimension than I think that film gave its main character. But yeah, I think if you like that film, you will like this. I think there's lots to like. Yeah, like you say, Peter, it looks great. It's like it's got that kind of like boxy look, and I love when it goes into the audition scenes, it busts into this kind of vibrant color, you know, and it's like these kind of reds, and it just kind of changes the atmosphere. And you can it's actually quite hard to show good acting on screen, but you know, she's kind of gripping as a performer. Her character, sort of the actor playing the character is actually a good actor, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? No.
I got it.
It's very hard to portray. It's very hard to be an actor who's portraying an actor. You know, in the same
So
way.
her acting that she's acting is good.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, it's like she switches from being this kind of nervy woman who doesn't quite know what she's doing with her life to be actually a really good performer. So, yeah, I loved all that. I loved those scenes. Yeah, thumbs up for me.
Cute.
So Ramona is on Tuesday the 7th at 9 p.m. and on Wednesday the 8th at 1:15 p.m. Both at GFT. Is also on the Audience Award list. And yeah, Ramona, very good. Go and check it out. And finally, for the main reviews from GFF, Skin Deep, which is the debut feature from Alex Shad. It follows Layla and Tristan, who are kind of on a ferry to a remote island. There's a kind of evening gathering of the residents, which includes a raffle in which each number selected is held by a couple. Couples are then kind of introduced and given the gift of experiencing the world in each other's bodies. GFF program says highly original and hugely entertaining. And I turn to my colleague Anahit Berus for her thoughts on Skin Deep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I did not like this. Sorry to the film and to GFF. Yeah, it is like kind of a weird film tonally, I think. Because it has like this sort of body swap element to it that I think is meant to maybe be positioned as like a little bit quirky, a little bit kind of almost transcendental, like let's think outside the box, blah, blah, blah. But like honestly watching it, it reminded me of the scene in Get Out where they're like doing the raffle thing which is just like deeply fucked up. And then it also has like very midsummer vibes. And I think the film itself is kind of almost leaning it into that, in that the music is quite tense and it's just like weird. Like I just felt weird watching it. But then it never really follows through on this horror premise. So you're just given this kind of setup that is deeply uncomfortable, and then it goes on to like think about relationships and not really think about any of the sort of ethical or like whatever implications of that at all, which I just thought was a bit like tonally it just didn't really work. For me, it felt like a bit of a mess. I wasn't really also sure what it was trying to say. I think, yeah, potentially what it was kind of going for, because you have these couples, originally like the two couples just like swap with each other. So they're still in couples, but they're in the other couple's body, if that makes sense. But then after a while, they kind of start swapping like just one person or like with other people. And so it just becomes like a lot more entangled. And I think a lot of what it's going for is this idea of like, what does it mean to be in a gendered body? What does it mean to kind of be embodied? But it felt very surface level. And I think it felt like it was being more provocative than it was. Because there was a point where like the boyfriend of the couple is then like making out with a girl, but she's in a man's body. And I think you're meant to be like, wow, like what is he thinking? And it's like, I mean, like men fuck men all the time. Like, I don't know. Like, is that this interesting? And I don't know, it just felt a little bit, I didn't really get it. I think the central woman's storyline, I think her name is Layla. So Layla and Tristan are like the main couple. Because she is the one that's like the propulsive force in it, that she keeps wanting to swap. And she's clearly just very unhappy. And she needs this like for like the mentee H, essentially. But the film never really kind of goes into why she's so discomforted within her own body. Why does it help her so much to be in someone else's? Like it kind of touches on these ideas, but it doesn't entirely follow them through. I will say the performances are really good, and they would have to be in a film like this, because obviously you're being different people all the time, and especially the boyfriend Tristan was very, very good at switching from like very sweet like little soft boy to suddenly like this complete asshole when that complete asshole's like spirit is in his body, and I thought that was quite smart. But yeah, just the whole time I was watching it, I was like, this just feels like if, I don't know, like fucking SNL or something made a skit about like German films. Like, do you know what I mean? It felt like the cliches of that sort of like what we imagine bad European like continental filmmaking to be, which it actually isn't most of the time. It like not at all, but then this was. And so I didn't like it.
Yeah,
Sorry. I feel like I've offended the whole of Germany.
Not until the very end, when you're just like, and another thing.
It is sort of, what is it, throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. It
Yeah.
has so much that it's firing off all at once. And when I was going in, I knew nothing about this film. So when I sort of realized, like, oh, it's about these young couples who go to this hippy-dippy island to do a body swap with other couples, I was like, okay, so this is going to be like some sort of sexy drug trip. But then it starts making all these wild points all over the place about, like, relationships with the physical world and how your body fits into it and your brain chemistry. And some of it, I think, is actually quite interesting and made me, like, stop and dwell on it. And some of it was just incoherent babbling. So it was like a sexy drug trip, really. Like, it's served the purpose in the end of what it meant to do. You know, but I think that it does its sort of premise interestingly in that, yeah, like, it does kind of present the inhibiting of a body as a human sense. So if you were to swap into another body, everything would be new, and it would be like this euphoric, blissful reacquaintancing with the idea of sensation itself. Like, they're running around, like, smelling trees or whatever, because it's for the very first time they've got new nostrils. But then you've kind of got the flip side, which is that when you swap into another body, it's a totally different brain chemistry that you're working with, or hormonal balance, which sort of means that your perspective on life and whether or not you're happy is constrained to your body, which just feels like very bleakly sort of essentialist.
Yeah.
But it is like, I don't know, got some things going on, and yeah, it's just sort of like, it will definitely... There will be points where you're like, I can sort of see what they were doing, but I don't think that they had like a clear enough thesis all by itself. But it did seem more like an attempt to kind of use what was sort of freaky and cool about Europe in cinema right now, i.e. Midsummer, sort of like weird, culty, distant, who have access to sci-fi technology or ancient spells or whatever.
But like make it mumblecore.
Make it mumblecore. Well, yeah, like sort of use that to very clearly explore, I don't know if it was the director or the writer or whatever, very clearly explore like their own quite fleeting thoughts on bodies and like what we would do if given the opportunity to swap between them. And then, you know, the performances, you're right, are fantastic. They clearly just like, it feels a little bit improvisational to me, but still very well mastered in the sense that it's quite easy to forget that this character, that these are in fact actors who are just playing it differently than they were 10 minutes ago, and not that in fact there has been like an actual effect or a change that has like brought one character into the body of another. It's very convincing. But yeah, I don't think that I think that it sort of pales in comparison to more recent films that use these settings in much more like, I don't know, pointed ways with very specific things they want to talk about. This feels a little bit jazzier. It feels a little bit more sort of improvisational. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't.
It's quite film studenty, I think, in that way. I will say the most high-key relatable part is when Layla ends up in like a guy's body and she just can't stop wanking.
It's a deeply horny film. It's the thing where it's like, oh, so they're going to be like...
Why is that relatable?
Because I think if you were like in another gendered body, isn't that what you would do? If I were...
Yeah, probably.
It's what all the characters
If I were
do
in a
is
body with a penis, that is the
they
that is the
move
one thing I
bodies,
would do.
And then immediately just everyone becomes super horny. And like that, it's kind of one of the weaker points as well, is that the kind of conflict of the relationship, the central relationship of our protagonists, is that, you know, the main guy just like isn't that into it, like clearly just has been talked into doing this and doesn't really have his own reasons for doing it. It's a thing where we're expected to kind of, I don't know, feel like there's a lot of conflict happening in this relationship and that they've got to fight to keep together, but it doesn't really give us a strong reason for why they're together in the first place. It just seems like they want vastly different things, i.e. playing about with it.
Yeah, like baby, like maybe just like break up.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't think you need to do all of this. You're in your late 20s. I think the relationship has run its course, you know? But people will do things for love, clearly.
So anyway, Skin Deep's on Saturday the 4th of March at 6:15 and Sunday the 5th of March at 3:45 at Cineworld on Renfrew Street in Glasgow. Loved Annie just doing the Hannibal Buress, why are you all booing me? You know I'm right bit.
No, but really, if you were in like a body with different genital parts that you currently have. Isn't that the first thing?
Well,
What else would you
I was
do,
actually
Jamie?
thinking. I'm actually thinking of other body swap films where it's like that's actually quite refreshing because usually what happens in those things is the boy's like, "Ooh, I've got boobs," like, and then the girl's like, "Oh, I'm disgusted, I've got an erection." So that is actually quite a nice.
Yeah. But that is like
change.
that is what you would,
So that's one in the plus column for Skin Deep.
There we go.
Thinking outside the box. Now, to kind of give you some more suggestions, can't vouch for all of these to the same extent because certainly for mine, I haven't seen them. But we've had more of a dig through the programme, find some other stuff from directors we like, premises we think are good, films that might be worth going to watch, or potentially, Jamie, events that might be worth going to, question mark? He said, reading your notes and then waiting for you to start talking.
Yeah, well, as I was saying earlier, it's really cool that JFF can do events this year because, like, obviously COVID's calmed down. So I'm kind of pretty excited for the film Band, this Icelandic film. It's a documentary following the kind of misfortunes of this Icelandic female punk collective called the Post Performance Blues Band. That's going to be screening on the 9th of March at the CCA. But after that screening, you can go across the road to Nice and Sleazy's, where if you take your ticket, you can go along to a night of performance from local female and non-binary bands. And also headlining the night will be the actual Icelandic post-performance blues band because they've been flown over from Reykjavik for the screening and they're going to be playing and it's going to be really fun and cool. And yeah, that's the kind of thing that GFT are really good at, these kind of nights where like they mix music and film, and like so many like great nights I've had at GFF is when like these kind of like breakout things. I remember when oh god, I forgot her name now. Jessie Buckley from is that her name? Oh, is
Yeah,
Jessie Buckley
from Wild Rose.
Yeah, Wild Rose. Yeah, so after Wild Rose, what happened is Jessie Buckley just like turned up at the Grand Old Opry and like did some songs, you know.
Really?
So like things
That's
like
so
that.
sweet.
So this is the thing that JFF do a lot. They kind of mix film and music really well and make it really cool and fun. So yeah, if you've got a ticket for Band, I would say shoot across the road to Nice and Sleazy and have a good time. At the other end of the scale, I would also say make sure to go to some of the morning retrospectives because they're always brilliant. They're every day at kind of 10:30 on the GFF big screen. They're absolutely free. And there's always kind of an amazing intro from Alan Hunter, and they're just like a wonderful mix of classic Hollywood movies. So you've got things like Roman Holiday and It Happened One Night and Thelma and Louise are playing, but also a few kind of like really great art house films. So Agnes Varda's Vagabond is playing, Jean-Luc Godard's Pierre Le Fou is also playing, and there's also a film in there that I haven't even heard of, like this film just totally blindsided me. A film called Julia. I don't know if you know this film. It's a Fred what's it called? Fred Zimmerman film. It stars Jane Fonda and Vanessa Redgrave. It's got an early performance from Meryl Streep as well. So I'm going to try and get onto that. So yeah, something for everyone. I'm also looking forward to the new film from Carol Morley. It's a Typist, Artist, Pirate King. Carol Morley is I think a really interesting filmmaker who never makes the same film twice. She's always like so a surprise, you know. So like I think she's most famous, I think, for Dreams of a Life, the documentary she made a few years ago. But she's made sort of The Falling, which is a really weird, dreamy film, which I think is excellent and sort of really underrated. Then she made a really kind of, I think, quite bad film, like an adaptation of Martin Amis's film. It's like a kind of thriller called Out the Blue. But she's a real surprise, and this one is actually, I've heard, is like her back to her best. It's a film about this kind of underground artist, avant-garde artist called Andre Amos, and it's about an imagined road movie she might have taken with her psychiatric nurse. Audrey had schizophrenia, and it's like imagines the road trip she might have taken to kind of try and sort of I don't know, look back at her past and sort of explore her work. So yeah, it looks really interesting. Kelly MacDonald is in it. So is Monica Dolan. They're all both going to be at the screening, I think. And yeah, Carol Morley, always a surprise. So go and see her stuff.
Typist, Artist, Pirate King's on the 8th and the 9th at the GFT. And the morning retrospectives are every morning throughout the festival. I think you have to go in queue to get your tickets beforehand.
Yeah, and you have to queue because people do turn up. So I don't think they ever sell out because it's in the biggest screen, but you will get like 300 people turn up for like a weird film from the 1960s. So get there early if you want a good seat.
Festival magic, it lives on. Lewis, what were your picks from the additional stuff in the program that we didn't have time to watch?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's some that you will mention, and some that I've seen that James mentioned. Like, I've wanted to see Typist Artist Pirate King since I first saw the name of it, because it's such a like fun and pretty name, and then it just sounds really interesting as well. But other than that, I really want to see The Origin, which is this sort of horror thriller set in the Neolithic Highlands of Scotland, about like a Stone Age tribe who are like trying to find a new place to settle, and they're being hunted by something mysterious. We did an interview with the director, Andrew Cumming. You did the interview in this month's magazine. And I was even more interested when he cites Alien as its primary inspiration, because I was excited for this, but also like sort of, well, I'd been burned last year with The Northman, which just sort of turned out to be this like aggressive historical epic male power fantasy. But this actually sounds a lot more like, I don't know, nuanced and well thought out and quite meticulously put together. And I was also disappointed to find out that I was going to go and see Consecration, which is about a woman who goes to investigate a remote Scottish monastery after her priest brother was murdered. And it sounds very sort of secrets and conspiracies and very sort of C.J. Sansom book. But the one date that it was available, which was Saturday the 11th at GFT, looks like it's sold out now. So that's a shame. But still planning on going to see The Origin.
Good stuff. And The Origin is on Saturday the 5th and Tuesday the 7th, both at the GFT. And I think the thing with these things, like, if you want to go and see Consecration, you or anyone else listening to this podcast, always just pop along to GFT and see if they've got anyone to return their tickets or anything. You might be able to squeeze Lewis in, to find out all about
If you're scalping a ticket, let me know.
Get him on Twitter. He will find out what happened to this priest by hell or high water. Anahi, what else are you looking forward to?
So, yeah, I'm also looking forward to... I'm away for most of GFF, I will say. But I think I'm here for when It Happened One Night is doing its like retrospective screening, which is this Thursday morning, I think. So I might go through for that because I fucking love that film. And then I'm also excited for... not at GFF because I will not be able to see it, but in general, Rye Lane, which has been described as a kind of Before Sunrise but set in Brixton, which I think sounds sick. And then Chevalier, which is kind of looks like a Amadeus-y, Marie Antoinette thing about like a rock star composer in the 18th century, who was I think it's like a true story about, Joseph Bologne, who is the illegitimate son of an African slave, like enslaved person and a wealthy French plantation owner. And it just seems like it's cool vibes, has Calvin Harrison Jr. in it, who is always great. And then, I think that's all the films. I would also recommend, if you're at GFF and just knocking around, pizza at Paisano's, which is quite close, right?
It's like in town, and like you'll get your pizza so quickly that you'll not be in any rush.
Yeah. So I would recommend that too.
Sweet. Chevalier is on the 5th and the 6th, and Rye Lane is on the 12th
Oh, I'm here on the 12th.
of March. Things are
Maybe I
turning
could
round.
go. Oh my god.
It's at like 4 o'clock. I think it's like an afternoon one.
Oh, that's sick. Maybe I will go.
Man,
Okay.
things can change so much in the blink of an eye. I've also got a few things to recommend to you all. First up, I'm going to give you 4 words. German art house Truman Show. That is the kind of rough plot synopsis of The Ordinaries, which is a film where life is one big production and society is kind of separated into different strata of main characters, extras, and outtakes. And it's all about what your life would be like if you were trying to exist within this weird structure where everything is a film. There are musical numbers. It looks great. We couldn't get a screener in time for the podcast. That is on the 2nd and the 3rd of March. Blackberry, I love, as you all know, tech gone wrong stories where nerd hubris results in everyone going broke and or to jail. This looks slightly goofier than something like The Dropout, which was the one about the Theranos fraud and eventual jailing of everyone, or WeWork, where Jared Leto played the WeWork guy who somehow managed to
Oh my god, remember that.
avoid spending time at whoever's pleasure you spend time at in America. But this still looks like good fun. It's all about the kind of rise and fall of Research in Motion, who made the BlackBerry. It has the guy, Jay Baruchel, who is the voice of the kid in How to Train Your Dragon. It also has Glenn Howerton from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, playing tech bros in the 80s and 90s. What a lovely time. So that's on the 3rd at the GFT and the 4th at Cineworld. I would also just recommend Falafel to Go. If you want some falafel to go round the corner from the GFT, heard very good things about Mosob, the Ethiopian Eritrean place round by Queen Street Station. If you come out the side entrance and then go up the little staircase, it's at the top of the little row there. Massive things of injera with loads of little bits on them.
Oh, holy shit.
I
Yeah.
didn't know we could do food recommendations.
Well, we'll come back round to you in a second.
You were literally in the office when we were talking about this.
I suggested falafel to go. You laughed at me.
No.
Yeah, I know. That's just what we do.
You stole my idea.
Pints, go to the State Bar, go to the Flying Duck, and if you can't get into the band night that Jamie recommended at Sleazy's on the 9th, just have a White Russian upstairs and wait for enough people to leave that you can get in. That's how I play the festival game. I recommend lots of food, I get drunk upstairs, maybe I watch the film if I can get it. Jamie, you got any food recommendations last minute?
Yeah, okay. Well, I would say falafel to go, very good. But also another healthy option is Non Viet, which is just along the corner, does amazing pho, or pho, I never know how to say it. Delicious Vietnamese soup. Yummy. Also, if you want a drink, I would say go to Saramango.
Yes, yeah.
Because the beers are so cheap, but also it's like basically because the GFF doesn't have a bar anymore, that's kind of become the kind of like hangout for people. So if you find yourself at a loose end after a film, head on there. You'll probably see some filmmakers, some critics, some cool people. You can chat about movies. You'll have a great time.
Some of those
You
are
can-
not the same thing.
You might see me, Jamie Dunn, in Saramago. It's upstairs in the CCA. Look out for your man, Jamie Dunn.
I'll be sticking of falafel and pho and have lots of opinions about films.
Covered in chickpeas, cheap pints all around. The Glasgow Film Festival, everybody. So yeah, GFF runs from the 1st to the 12th of March. You can get all the info on all these films we just talked about and get tickets, etc., at glasgowfilm.org. And you can follow them on socials. I think they're on Glasgow Film Fest at everything. They've done that good thing where they have the same handle on everything.
Yeah.
Top lads, good work. So yeah, I think that's everything from us from this GFF special recording at Upload. Thanks to Josh, uploadstudios.co.uk. Thanks, Anahit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Cheers, Peter.
And yeah, thank you from me. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Enjoy Glasgow Film Festival, everyone. And if you go to Saramago, tell them Jamie Dunn sent you.
I might get a free pint out of that.